With me, I have my great friend Grady, who, I mean, we've known each other for what, like 20 plus years?
Well, it's gonna be 25, I think.
Yeah. Go back a long time. Video games are a huge part of that. I mean,
Absolutely.
we played Perfect Dark in the day, GoldenEye in the day, tons of games through the
Even games that
years.
weren't that good. Like, how many hours we put on that, Pod Racer game?
A lot. I
Like,
still love I still love that game though. That's still such a good game. And do you remember the other N64? You remember that, like, I think it was called San Francisco Rush, where it was
oh,
just like
yeah.
stunt cars that we would just flip
Mhm.
cars up off of this weird geometry. Somebody just the N64 had just crazy games going on.
Yeah.
But so today we're talking rare replay. Um, as you may or may not know, for Extra Life this year, I am allowing people that donate $100 to choose a game. I go spend some time on it. We'll do a design discussion. I'll do kind of a let's play video part of this, but you also have the opportunity to, just like Grady's doing, hop on, discuss the game a little bit, discuss maybe why you chose it, have a little bit of a conversation about the good, the bad, the ugly, and just kind of get into it a little bit. So that's what we're going to do with Rare Replay. For those that aren't familiar, Rare Replay is a collection of a ton of rare games. I didn't realize how many games were in here until I hopped in a little bit today, and it goes from, like, I want to say like 1983 to
Yeah.
2008. Like, it's a huge span, tons of games. I mean, you have stuff from the like Atari generations through arcade like cabinets, all the way through, like, I think the most recent one is one of the um, Banjo Tootie or
Yeah.
Banjo-Kazooie Nuts and Bolts or one of those. But it's a 2008 game. And a ton of stuff that I haven't played too. Like, we had originally had a conversation about Conkers and trying to
Right.
find just Conkers. And that's one of those that I have never played, but everyone is like, oh, well, you like, if you like the N64 generation, you've got to play Conkers. Like, Conkers is this like um, fantastic, like, forbidden fruit. And it's so I looked at it when you had first mentioned. I'm like, I might be able to
Mhm.
find a cart of it. Like, original carts for Conkers are going for like $200 to $300. Like, it's
Yeah.
like a collector's item at this point. So I'm like, well, that's not happening. I'm not finding that. And so then you had mentioned the Rare Replay, and I knew it was a rare game. And at first, I didn't know if it was on there. I'm like, that might be one of those weird ones that just isn't on there, but it is. And so I plan on diving at least a little bit into that. Definitely some Perfect Dark. I'm going to give pretty much everything on that collection a try, at least to a certain extent. So, I mean, the first question obviously is like, why was this a choice?
Yeah. So, I mean, obviously, like, between our shared history is so much GoldenEye and Perfect Dark. So, I mean, that was like a perfect touchstone for that. And in going back to play those games, I played around a lot of those other weird games. There's so many weird games on there. Some of them are just classics, Battletoads and stuff that are just
Mm,
timeless classics, and some of them are just weird, like Grabbed by Ghoulies, and there's
yeah.
some, like, Jetpac games that are sorta like Joust, but different, and,
Yep.
like, I don't even know where those might have been, like, on Commodore or something. Like, I never even had any experience with those until I just got that pack, and so there's a progression of these weird games that are totally unrelated, technologies and stuff, but there's some sort of weird thread of just, like, kind of humor and oddness about them. Like, they're all just a little bit weird,
Yeah.
except
Yeah.
for
Rare does a great job of that. And the other thing I noticed,
yeah,
so I played a little bit today of those older ones, like that, like
mhm,
1983 to 1990 range. And the thing that caught me is, like, every one of their games, there's like a certain, like, part of technology that was just like beyond what others were doing. Like, even those like Commodore Atari levels, like, they have some isometric stuff going on there that's like, I did not realize anyone was playing with isometrics in like 1985. Like, I couldn't
yeah,
recall any. Like, I mean, I remember playing like some of the old Rogue and that kind of stuff, and you're like top down. Maybe you get into that like pseudo, like, 3D-esque where it's not really 3D. But
yeah,
yeah, like, the isometric stuff was crazy. It got super hard to control. Like, they definitely did not quite grasp that. But, like, technology wise, like it was insane. And even getting
Yeah.
like the one in that old that I played a lot of that I didn't even realize was rare until I jumped to this collection was RC Pro Am. Like I played a
Right.
ton of that on the NES, but just never really put together that it was rare. But same thing, like isometric view, race
Right.
cars, like at the time, like you didn't think much about it. You're like, oh yeah, this is a cool like racing game. But technologically speaking, it's pretty sound.
RC Pro Am is so hard for me to play because I'm always trying to figure out which direction I need to move my controller to make it correspond to the screen,
Yeah.
and I've never gotten it right.
Oh, it's weird. Like there were
Yeah.
definitely a few turns that I'm just like back opposite direction. I'm like, okay, well, I'm out this race. So,
Yeah.
but fun. Like, and then I got into like the other NES one was the Cobra Triangle, where it's like RC
Oh,
Pro Am but boats, and
yeah.
it just has some like crazy mini games in there too. Like, it's not strictly racing. It's like, okay, RC Pro Am's racing. Let's do something that's a little bit different. It has games where you're like stealing mines from other boats and trying to like detonate them somewhere else. Like some really, I mean, just like you said, like there's some good old school classic games in there.
Yeah, I started playing that one too, and I thought, like initially, I thought it was gonna be sorta like River Raid or something, and then
Yeah,
there's, like, other boats that come and steal your mines when you're trying to get into the thing. It's like yeah,
yeah,
it's a fun game.
yeah, yeah.
Ye
Lots of cool stuff. So what's I mean, I think I probably know the answer here. Like in that collection, what's your favorite game of the collection?
I mean, I'm torn between GoldenEye and Perfect Dark.
No.
GoldenEye for its time period was just the game, like, in a way that I don't think Perfect Dark was, even though it's a technically superior game, it's so much faster, it plays so much better, uh, but I think GoldenEye probably has my heart just from,
Yeah.
nostalgia purposes.
Yeah. I always love like Perfect Dark was like the Golden Eye was the like it was the test run to me, right? It was like, okay,
Yeah,
we have this intellectual property, we have an idea, like let's try it. And then Perfect Dark was the like, okay, let's forget that we have to adhere to this intellectual property and let's build the game we want to build. And to me,
yeah,
that was Perfect Dark. Like to me, that's the like, okay, like the combination, I think the two things that did it for me were the Sims, like the damn Sims, and being able to customize those with like at least what little bit of AI you could, and then the like custom game settings. Because GoldenEye had the few
yeah,
where it's like, hey, you have like 10 or so selections where it's like, oh, do you want slappers only? Do you want
yeah,
this? But like Perfect Dark allowed you to like go in and almost set slots where it's like this weapon slot is going to be the laptop gun. This weapon slot is going to be the RCP 90 or whatever, where
yeah.
you're fine tuning these game mechanics. And I remember like we would get some absolutely bonkers stuff going on. Like my favorite, and I still to this day like tell people about this, but playing tranks and slappers only, where it's just screens are purple and swirly and you're trying to slap people and like who
Oh,
knows where anyone is. And like I just remember those because the tranks won't do any damage. Like they don't, you can't, I mean, I think you could switch
I think
into
it's a
that like lethal
sliver.
injection or whatever, where
No,
it was like, because everything has the dual weapon, right? Like
the
there's always
secondary mode.
yeah, there's like the weapon and then the secondary weapon. And I think the tranks had the like lethal injection, but it
Hmm,
was like always just that unspoken rule where it's like, hey, don't nobody switch to lethal
no.
injection. Just trank people up, get screens purple, and slap the hell out of people. And
Oh, yeah.
it was a riot. Like, and then you'd add like a handful of meat sims, and you'd add like one random specialized sim. Like I remember
Yeah,
using the venge sims a lot, where it's just whoever killed them last, they are
they go
after it, and
after
it
him.
created this like weird dynamic where it was like, oh shit, I killed the venge sim, like it's gonna be a nightmare for a little bit, and they would just hunt you down and like make you
Yeah.
pay for it, but. Really fun. Any like as far as the rest of the collection, anything that jumps out? We talked about a couple, but like what hidden gems are there? Like in your
So I
eyes?
so some good ones. There's one where you just destroy stuff. Like you get different like you can get like a bulldozer and you just have to like destroy stuff. You're clearing a path for a like a caravan and that's just the whole premise is like you just have to for some reason this truck is going somewhere and there's a bunch of buildings in its way and you have to kill those.
I
And
didn't get
and
to that
then
one today. I'm excited now. I
yeah,
love
that's
breaking
a
stuff.
I'll need to yeah. That's a strange one. And some like one of the things you have is like a Gungan robot kind of thing, like you just like smash down on the top of buildings. So that one's pretty fun. I don't know how replayable it is or how much depth there is, but for 15 or 20 minutes, it's pretty fun to just go break a bunch of stuff.
Nice. Yeah, I'll keep
And
my eye out for it.
Battletoads Arcade is another one that's just
Um,
pretty
that
fun.
like speaking of the Battletoads, like that's one thing that jumped out to me is I played the NES Battletoads and the arcade one
Mhm.
just because I wanted to give a quick comparison. And it's just like that. I mean, obviously it's night and day difference. Like the
Yeah.
technologies were worlds apart, but like it just led me back to like how many of those games were amazing at arcades and then they just tried to do those like NES and even SNES. Like some of the SNES ports don't hold up. Like I remember
Yeah.
like NBA Jam was one for me. Like the arcade version of
Mhm.
NBA Jam is amazing. The SNES is decent, but there's like just enough not right about it that it like you want to get back to the arcade. You're still going and dumping
Yeah.
quarters in that arcade. And
Yeah.
Battletoads is like night and day. Like it's just the
Yeah.
animation cycles, the like level backgrounds, like everything is just amped up on that arcade version.
Yeah. The NES hardware is so limited, it's really amazing they were able to do what they could with that
Yeah.
game.
Yeah, and Battletoads, I think that was at the end of that. Like I'm pretty sure it was like towards
Yeah.
the end of that NES life cycle. So they were squeezing everything they could out of that cartridge. As far as collections are concerned, this is the other thing. Like as I scrolled through games, I was like, this is like there's some amazing titles on here. And like especially once you get to the later, like you have a couple of the Banjo-Kazooie games, you've
Right.
got both Perfect Darks, Conkers, like tons of great games. Is this like in your eyes, is this like one of the greatest collection games? Because those are starting to like pop up a lot recently, I've noticed. Like there's a handful,
It
especially grabbing some of the old schools. Is this one of the better collections?
I think for a console, it has to be probably the best one that I'm aware
Yeah.
of. Like that I have, personal interactions with and I'm still learning stuff about and stuff. I think it's a really good selection. I think if you're going to PCs, they did that thing starting about 10 years ago where they just would repackage all King's Quests and sell them at
Yeah.
whatever for $5. And
Yeah.
like those things are hard to beat too. But for a console, I think that's the best sort of anthology on a console.
Yeah. Yeah.
And
It's
it's
been
got
a
some
ton.
interesting things like production notes and stuff. And
Yeah.
once you get those little achievements in there, then you can watch more videos of them making things
Yep.
and
That's
stuff.
what I was going to say is this has a really nice, like a lot of those collections, like especially if you're grabbing them off of like a Steam or a GOG or something, like they bundle the games together, but like it's just the games. Like it's you
Yeah.
basically have to get separate install files and all of that. But like this is not like it's packaged nicely. Like there's a great like user interface to get from game to game and tons of that additional content. Like I got to the point where I could watch a couple of those like making of videos and like there's some good stuff. Like there's some like really great like historical footage and like little vignettes about Rare that like I was learning stuff that I didn't know. Like I kind of came into Rare where like most people did with like the golden eyes, the perfect darks. Like I didn't realize they were making stuff like clear back in the
Yeah.
80s. But yeah, some cool stuff like as part of a collection. I can't think of another collection that has like that level. The Mega Man collections have like some of that and I think some art and stuff, but like no videos about like the making ofs and games that never came to fruition and that kind of stuff.
Yeah. Mega Man's a good example of an anthology of good games together, but like they're just those games. Like it's just
Yeah,
yeah.
for sure. What like in your mind, like because I went back through and looked at like some of the things that Rare has made. Is there anything like from the Rare standpoint that's missing from here that would put this over the top for you?
I don't know. I I sort of don't know what else Rare did. I think they had a part in like a bunch of Nintendo branded stuff in that time period, like I think Donkey Kong Country
Yep.
stuff. And those Donkey Kong Country games are, amazing.
Yeah. Yeah,
They're
those were
really
the big
fun.
ones for me, and that's like understandably, like obviously, like Nintendo's licenses or Nintendo's licenses. The Donkey Kong countries are the big ones. The other one that I played the shit out of is Diddy Kong Racing, like in that same IP.
Oh,
Like I don't know if you played that, but like
I
I
never played
still
it.
to this day say Diddy Kong Racing is better than the N64 Mario Kart, which
Oh,
is like a pretty bold statement. But it was, I mean, it was kart racing, but it was like boats, airplanes, and cars. Um, and
oh,
it just had some like crazy level design and like a really fleshed out like single player campaign where like you would unlock parts of the island and but that game's great. The other one that I didn't realize they made, I had to research this, but Wizards and Warriors was a rare
oh,
game back in the day. It was published by Acclaim, but I guess they made it. And I was like, oh,
huh.
that's like a jewel. Like that's an
Yeah,
NES jewel that should be in there.
for
But
sure.
yeah. Anything else about the collection you want to say?
I don't think so. I think we've covered it pretty well. It's a lot of fun, and there's a lot of games that are good for a really kind of just a short snippet, like because if you're playing this in 1983, you would get one game every couple of months or whatever, and you would have to play these games with not that many mechanics for just over and over,
Yep.
and they were super hard,
Yeah.
and you'd get stuck for weeks at a time until you found your buddy at school who had beat it, knew the trick or where to
Yep.
stand for which boss or whatever. And so those are really fun to just get a little taste of. You don't have to really, play through.
Yeah. Fun stuff. Okay. Well, the other part, like to wrap this up, platform is yours. Like as a donator, which I greatly appreciate the donation to Extra Life. Platform's yours. Whatever you want to
Okay.
like talk about socials you want people to follow you on, any projects you're working on, give company shout outs, whatever you want.
I don't know that I exist in the internet space like that, so
Everyone,
I'll
everyone
just
exists in the internet.
I'll just turn it back and say thank you for doing this. There's just really no better like thing to spend your time and money and effort on than like helping sick kids. Like that's kind of the pinnacle. So I appreciate that you're doing this. Putting your effort to this again. I don't know how many years have you been involved.
I think
Uh,
this is year 7 now.
wow.
Like it's been a wild ride for a few years now.
So your philanthropy with this has gone. It's in second grade now.
Yeah,
Like
it's all
yeah,
grows up. It's all
it's all
grows
grows
up.
up. Grow up so fast. Cool, man. Well, I appreciate it, and
Yeah,
we should do this again sometime soon.
yeah. Let me know. Keep thinking about game number 2. You've got another one in the
Okay,
hopper, so let me
I've
know and we can
I've
hop
got a
on.
few candidates.
Perfect. Okay.
Thanks.
Thank you. See
Have
you.
a good one.
Let's dive into some rare replay. We appreciate the donation from Grady and his choice. He donated twice, and we're going to dive into 2 games of his choice. The first one is a little bit of a cheat code, but he suggested we play Rare Replay, which is an absolutely like amazing collection of games. Like we can take a look here, but it's like 20 plus games. This is a huge collection, and it's a huge span. I mean, we're going from 1983 to, I mean, let's count as we go. I mean, we've got 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12, 14, 15, 16, 17, 18, 19, 20, 21, 22, 23, 24, 25, 26, 27, 28, 29, 30, 31 games in this collection, which for an hour of play, I'm not going to be able to dive into all of these. I'm going to jump into a ton of like all of the old school ones. We'll play all of the like Spectrum, the Atari 2600, the coin op ones. I'm probably going, if I have to choose one of these series that we're not going to jump into, I'm probably going to skip the Viva Pinata games. I've never played them, but they're just like not up my alley. And so if I have to cut anything, it'll be that. We'll probably end up dropping Cameo as well. I played Cameo way back on the original Xbox, and I remember it being a decent game. But again, like we just don't have the time to play everything. I'm definitely going to spend a little bit of time in Conkers because it's high. Like I've had multiple people tell me to play it and I never have. We're going to touch Banjo-Kazooie a little bit, but I probably won't play all of the Banjo-Kazooie iterations. Same with Perfect Dark. Like I probably won't get to Perfect Dark and Perfect Dark Zero. Just because these more recent games are tricky. But everything prior to that, I'll give pretty much all of these time because you can jump in and play them super easy. Like I don't need to spend a ton of time on Attak or Saberwolf. Like I can play them for a second and give like a high level rundown. But we want to look at this a game in whole, right? Like the idea is that we're spending an hour with this and giving a sense of like a let's play or design discussion on the game in whole. So although we're going to dive into each of these games individually and talk about them, really the big picture we're looking for here is like, well, what does this collection do in whole? And right off the bat, like, I mean, this is huge. This is 30 games in a collection, which is crazy. Like, I can't think of another collection. You get bundles and stuff on like Humble Bundle and GOG and Steam will do like game collections where you buy them as a group, but really they're the individual games. Like this is packaged in a UI UX, like you've got these like cool little frames. It gives information on here. And then one of the other things that we didn't even look at, but back here on this front menu, there's movies. Like there's like history of Rare and the making of games. And not only that, but you have to unlock these. Like if we go to these featurettes, you only unlock these for view by playing the games, which is kind of cool. Like you don't just get to go in and watch, like they want people to play the games and then you can unlock these. Like I don't even have enough to watch this second video and I've put in a decent amount, but I mean, you can jump in and you can watch some of these videos and they're great stories. Like it's really cool to hear like how they came up with some of these ideas and some of the ideas that didn't make it. And like they have a specific making of video for like most of these games. I mean, you can see like this is a like Banjo and Kazooie making of. They have a Battletoads making of, Conker's making of, Killer Instinct, Viva Pinata, Blast Core, Force Gemini. Like these are all like really cool videos. Like I want to watch that Battletoads one because I have loved Battletoads since the beginning. You have like concept showcases, tons of material in here, like well outside of what would be a normal game. I mean, normal games aren't going to have all these videos and other stuff. This Previously Unseen is cool too. Like these are concepts that never made it. I haven't unlocked any. Oh, I guess, yeah, there's like 5 videos here that I haven't unlocked any of. Cameo 2, like this is interesting. Like I didn't know they were even working on that. So tons of cool content. And so as a whole, this Rare Replay collection is actually like a pretty sweet setup where tons of games to play, old school, new school, everything. So let's dive in. Let's take a look at a few of the games. Let's do some discussion on them and kind of get a feel for what we're looking at. So first off, we're going to take a look at the Jetpac series. We're going to kind of play a few of the games here because this is one of the few that they do have old school, new school, a few iterations of. Like it's a little bit different in that regard. So we're going to dive in and take a look at them. First off, I mean, this is a 1983 game that they have, which is fantastic. Like very simple controls. You pretty much have a shoot. Like I just got destroyed. And then it's like up and down, left and right. Like that's pretty much what it is. The idea here, you're trying to collect first your ship pieces. So like I got this ship piece here. Let's go drop it off. We're going to get this top one. And then you're collecting fuel. And then obviously like just trying to not get hit by people, which I'm not amazing at. But you can see like pretty rudimentary. I mean, we're talking like 1983 here. This is early video games. Like this is kind of where it stood. Like even the colors and stuff here, like you've got like these enemies are like different colors. They have slightly different. You can see that it's like giving some of them a trajectory to start. And then some of them are just like straight left and right. You can see that blue one there kind of sliding in from an angle. But again, like you're collecting, you're scoring, you have a high score up there. You can see my high score is 3,500. I did not do so well that round, but incredibly rudimentary game, yet like fun. Like of all of the old school ones, I probably have put the most hours into Jetpac just because it's like a classic. It reminds me just like, it's like this mix of like asteroids where you have like full three-dimensional or not three-dimensional, but you have like full screen movement where you can jump from like up, down, left, right, as opposed to like just a simple platform where it's like, oh, just slowly move from left to right. You can see you can also power up your weapons. Like I got that like weapon power up there. And it can start to make our weapons a little more powerful. And so you can see like now I'm like really trying to clear stuff out. The goal ultimately is like, we're just trying to get fuel, but for a rudimentary game, like it's fun. Like there's other games that we'll touch on very lightly here, that are old school ones that I just couldn't put the same amount of time into. And the thing that really jumps out to me in the Jetpac series is we'll jump into the newer one, the remake of it. And it's a concept that like I love. I love this idea of taking what was an old school classic and truly diving into like, hey, we're not going to mess with gameplay a whole bunch. Like we're not going to go crazy with gameplay. We're just going to give this a new skin. We're going to give it some new controls, new technology, and ultimately just change the experience. Like let's go and sort these. You can see like we have like, here's the Jetpac refueled. We're talking 2007. Like this was an Xbox live arcade game is really what this game was. I can't remember if it was on the Indie Arcade or not. Oh, sweet. I got some stamps. Those stamps are how you unlock those videos. So as I slowly move along, but you can see we're going to jump into the remastered, and they don't go out of control. Like obviously the enemies get a whole new skin. Your character gets a skin. Graphics get like absolutely upped because we're talking, this is a difference of, this is 25 years almost difference between Jetpac and Jetpac Refueled. So we'll jump into you can see like we have like, I can do different levels. Like I can join from like level 1, 2, 3, 4. I'm just going to start from 1 so we see the same thing. But you'll see huge update in graphics. Overall, like I'm still jetpacking around. I'm still shooting people. Like nothing crazy. But the weapon improvements, like look at how my weapon improves over time. Like I'm already like to the point where like I can just obliterate things. I'm going to go start collecting some of these rocket pieces. Again, same concept, like collect rocket pieces, collect fuel. I've got to collect this other base first. See, that's the one thing, like the messaging isn't very clear on like what I need to collect first. Like I didn't know that I like couldn't grab fuel before the other pieces. But you get that pretty fast. And once you've assembled the rocket, you really do like, you just collect fuel from that point. I think it's not until level 5, like at level 5, I think you have to collect a different type of rocket and you build like another rocket. You see again, my weapon's now thicker. Like I've gone all the way past the first weapon upgrade and now I'm like really upgrading my weapons. You can see like I'm like a laser champion now. The other thing I love, like you'll notice that fuel, like it has the giant thing around it. Like there's no missing where that fuel dropped, which is kind of nice. Like it makes it a little easier, but I think in a game like this, it's about that easiness. It's a little bit easy. It's kind of mindless play, but still fun. Like, I'm still like enjoying just zooming around, shooting and collecting. And I would love to see like the gameplay doesn't change a lot. Like they didn't add anything crazy here. The weapon upgrades are significantly different. but the overall gameplay didn't get great. Like, they didn't add some ridiculous story to this. They didn't add like superfluous features. They kind of just said, hey, let's reskin what was a fun arcade game. And it really makes me wonder, like, where else you could do that. Like, you've seen that. Like, I've played so many iterations of like Oregon Trail, where it's like, hey, this is the same Oregon Trail that you've played your entire life. Oh, they added that like giant explosion button too. I don't know if the first one had that. If it did, I don't know what button it was. That might have been a new feature. And there are parts where like I've gotten overwhelmed and had to use that. But for the most part, like I kind of forget about it just because I'm so used to playing that original arcade. But I'd love to see more of these style of remakes. Like, you see it in some of the big titles. I mean, Pac-Man has been redone. You have like the Pac-Man 99 kind of concepts, and they're more or less the same game. You're not completely changing mechanics, and I think that's a great concept. I'd love to see more of it. And I think Jetpac's a killer example of doing this well, like without going completely back to the drawing board. Let's just get some artists, reskin it. I mean, they could probably take the majority of the code from before, maybe update the physics a little bit, but the physics didn't even feel bad in that 1983 version. So overall, this is like this is probably easily my favorite of the old school games in this collection. And one of my favorites in this entire collection. You can kind of see now, if you wait a little bit, the enemies can start to like add up, and that's where that like explosion button can be nice. Or you can just use it as like a save button. Like if I get hit, or if I'm about to get hit and my weapon's like really powered up, I can kind of use that as a like, oh crap button, where it's like, hey, this is my last ditch effort to save me. So overall, Jetpac is really good. You could see before, like, we'll hop out of here. There is the Jetpac refueled, or not jet. This is Jetpac refueled. There's the like lunar Jetpac man or something. I can't remember what it's called. But there is another like Jetpac game that involves a car that was kind of like the real successor to Jetpac. And I didn't love it as much. Like, if we go back, I mean, Lunar Jetman, I think is what it's called. And I don't even know if for sure it is a second to it. But it has the same like character sprite. So I kind of viewed it as the same game because you'll kind of see the characters the same. I couldn't figure this one out as much. And I just died a lot. So this one wasn't my favorite. The one thing that I didn't mention is these old school games. Oh, a missile's been launched. I never even saw this screen before. I don't know what it is, but it seems bad. But again, like, we have these, but these old school games also have this rewind button, which I didn't really comprehend at the start. But putting that into these old school games, I mean, these games were hard. The goal of these games was to take your quarters. So I love that it does like this like old school VHS, like rewind kind of look and sound effect. But it adds tons of replayability. Like, I can come all the way back to these spots, and if I just make a little mistake that I'm like, oh, that was dumb, or maybe I just wasn't paying attention for a second, it gives me something that I can like go back to and do, and just go like, okay, I was so close, I died, let me just rewind. Okay, now let me avoid that asteroid. And it gives me something that I can work on, which is a really cool feature for these old school games. I think we kind of like lose track of just little stuff like that, like little improvements over like what would be the coin-op version of this. Instead of having to dump quarters into it, you could easily do that. And you can see, like, you have Hall of Fames, you have your traditional high score lists, which was classic for those coin-op games, right? Like, you wanted to keep pumping quarters in there because you wanted to see your name at the top of that list, and someone would come along and beat it, and you try to get next in line and get yourself back up there. So really fun concepts here. Attak is another one of those games that like I had never played until this, but really once I dove in, and we'll take a look at it here, it reminds me of like the original Legend of Zelda. You have these like, it's like all dungeons, Legend of Zelda, but you just have like some classic, like, it's top down, you have this sort of like, I hate to say it's 3D because it's not, but you almost have that like pseudo 3D look of like those walls, like you're kind of trapped and the walls get sort of the weird isometric view. But it just reminds me a lot of that, of a lot of these like Legend of Zelda dungeons. A little less like obvious, like what I'm trying to do here. I can see my turkey like over on the side, and that obviously is my life. For some reason, without touching something, I died. I think your life, your turkey, like just slowly dies down over time. Like over time, that turkey like works its way down as you move. You're supposed to find keys, is what I gather. I don't know if there's an easy way to know where those are. Like I didn't find it. I did find that there's bosses. There's items like that you can pick up. And so the gameplay is a lot like Zelda. And I like that. Like I love this like top down, just fighting some enemies. It's like the rudimentary dungeon crawler, right? And you're earning some power-ups and stuff. You also have these like, I can fall down these grates down to the next levels, which that's kind of where you have to get to start collecting some of these like stronger enemies. But you get to a point where there's like some enemies that are like, they're not one-shot kills by any means. And I couldn't even find, in some cases, I couldn't even find how to kill them. Like I sat and hit one of them for 20 minutes and just couldn't put it to it. You have the stairs as well. Again, reminds me of Zelda. Like when you find the item dungeon rooms and it's like the pseudo climbing the ladder stairs, even though it's still 2D, which is just an interesting concept. So I don't know what came of that. Like, and some of these items you can't pick up. Like I get the impression like, cause you get to choose from 3 characters. Like right now I'm playing the knight. I get the impression that like some of the characters might be only able to pick up certain items. Like maybe only the serf can pick up the cross or something, like, or the wizard. I honestly don't know, but like you can see, I can't pick up that item. And it makes me wonder, like if those items, somewhere along the lines I died. I think it's just that food slowly wears down. I shouldn't have picked that up. I should have left that because I had like almost full health. And then you got like just weird, like, I don't know what these like 1884 capsules are. So, I mean, a lot to be desired. I assume that there's a manual, and I assume like I could go in and look at that. But I mean, at first glance, like it's hard for me to tell exactly what I'm trying to do here. And why, like, I don't know if I need like a certain thing to get in these locked doors. The other doors seemingly just kind of like open and close randomly. Like you can see like that just opened. This will open eventually, seemingly randomly. So a lot to be desired here, but I do like this idea of like the top-down Zelda kind of, I hate to say clone, because I'm pretty sure the date on this was prior to Zelda, but I did spend a ton of time on this one just because like I love that style game. I love the original Zelda. Really fun to kind of play through. I mean, what's the date? Yeah, the date on this is 83. The original Zelda is 86. So it makes me wonder like how much like the original Zelda dungeon style took from something like Attak, how much of a concept it took. Then you get into like Saberwolf and Underworld. We're going to take a look at those. And I had a really hard time like figuring out the niche that was this game. Because I mean, I use my saber. Oh, I did kill someone. I was having a really hard time killing enemies the first time I played this. It was like I couldn't tell. Maybe the rhinos you like can't hit with your saber or something. Maybe only certain enemies you can hit with your saber. I don't know. But I was having a really hard time determining like what I can and can't do. Yeah, I guess rhinos you just don't saber a rhino. You just run from it. That's just simple. That's simple biology, I guess, right? Spiders, lizards, I can take care of those. Maybe that's what I was missing before. Fire. I can't saber fire. So again, like this is another sort of like a lot like the original Legend of Zelda. Like it's just got that sense of like top down. You're like working your way through these sorts of mazes. a lot of inspiration from that. Like this reminds me a lot of that Zelda series. The difference is in Zelda, like I felt a lot more like I inherently knew what I could and couldn't do in Zelda. Whereas this, I was a little confused at the start, trying to figure out like, what am I able to do? What am I not able to do? Obviously not able to saber a bat. Uh-oh. I got poisoned by a flower, so my controls flip-flopped. See, I didn't see that before. That's kind of a cool mechanic. Oh, I did saber the rhino that time. But not a spider. Just a lot of like little things here and there that I had a hard time like wrapping my head around like what I could and couldn't do in this game. But really good concept. One of my favorite things about like the Rare collection in whole is how many throwbacks they have to the other games. Like you'll notice Saber Wolf is obviously the name of this game. If we were to go in and jump into Killer Instinct, the wolf character in Killer Instinct, their name, I guess I don't know that it's a he, their name is Saberwolf. So again, just like little throwbacks to these different games, these different characters. And you see those introduced throughout. Like, if you go in, like we'll take a look at Grabbed by the Ghoulies, but Grabbed by the Ghoulies has tons of throwbacks to the other games. There's posters on the wall that are all the different old school games. You can see game cases on bookshelves that are the different games. Like it's loaded with that kind of stuff. Knight's Lore is kind of the intro, and I don't know, I didn't research, but this could very easily be one of the first isometric games that I'm aware of. I mean, 1984 for an isometric game is crazy to me. So we'll start one over. You can see I'm at a dead game here. But I mean, we're talking 1984 for isometric. Like we have an isometric game in 84, which seems crazy to me. But part of the problem is like these controls can get a little wacky. Like because you are in that like that 3/4 view space, it's a little bit confusing as to like what up, down, left, right will do. Like kind of the way that I sort of figured it out is you almost have to shift your controller that like 45 degrees or whatever. And then your D-pad kind of lines up to that properly. Like at that point, like you're like those buttons, I mean, I would have to like mirror this, but those buttons start to work out to like, okay, now they're the direction that I'm going. And so that's almost what I did is I find myself playing like this because then I am like a little bit like a little easier to move around. The idea here that at least as far as I could tell is you're a dude who like turns into a werewolf at night. And these different rooms, we go back to this sort of like dungeon style. These different rooms can do different things. I mean, you have jump controls. I can push those tables around. I don't know if the goal is to like push the tables around and trap people in this room. I can't get back up from this room. So you can kind of see like I probably have to push these tables to be able to get back up out of this room. We're going to try to just leave. This little ghost is like really getting up in my business. But you can see I'm like that night day is not very long. I've transitioned from wolf to man like multiple times here. So kind of an interesting concept of these different forms. I have yet to find what the difference is. Like I can jump in both forms. I assume there's some level of attack. If I'm a wolf, I can attack in some way. Maybe I don't think I move any faster or anything. So the real key to this to me is that isometric. And you'll see that in a few games as we move on. Like as we move through some of these games from 1984 on, we really start to dive into that isometric stuff. And you can see that with this. You can see this with Night Lore. You'll see this with Gunfight that we'll dive into here shortly. Yeah, you get that isometric from a couple of these, which is super interesting. And although some of the others, like once you get into like Slalom, RC Pro-Am, Cobra Triangle, Snake Rattle Roll. I mean, Snake Rattle Roll does go back to isometric, but these others, although they might be not true isometric, or at least visually they're not, they control that same way. Like, you almost have to flip your controller. And Grady mentioned, like, when we talked about RC Pro-Am, like, I played a ton of RC Pro-Am as a kid, but it's tricky. Like, you're going laps around this course, and you have to kind of like tilt your controller as you're going to remember which left, right. Taking a look at Gunfight, again, isometric view. Like, we're diving into this isometric concept. This is like a gunfighting game. You're trying to go and find these criminals, shoot them down. Again, I'm not going to spend a ton of time on it, but it's really cool that like they dove sort of head first into this isometric game. Slalom gets a little bit more into the like the rad racer, as I like to call it. It's sort of the rad racer concept where it's kind of a behind view. It's sort of that third person view, camera set behind you. You're skiing down a hill, but it's kind of recreating. It's sort of faking this recreation of like what is like pseudo three-dimensional. You see objects in the background start to make their way to the foreground. They start out as little dots, and then they get a little bit of detail to them, and then you can see, oh, it's a tree, I've got to avoid it. And that comes into play because it's a twitch reaction game. You're trying to avoid obstacles, and you're trying to make it in between flags, and you're trying to keep your speed up and watch out for the other racers. You're ultimately trying to beat these other ski racers down the hill. And when it's a dot in the background, sometimes you don't know, oh, is that a flag that I need to be behind, or is that a tree that I need to watch out for? And as it moves into the foreground, you're quickly trying to react to it. And it can be a fun game trying to get those scores. And I think that's the first, like, of the ones in this collection, I think Slalom is the first NES game. And you can see, like, it's a pretty big jump. I mean, you go from 1984, 83, 84, you have the one game, Gunfight, is 1985, and then you take a big jump to 1987. So you can kind of see, like, there's that stagnation. And that's also kind of that realm during the video game crash. Like, we had those years where video games just kind of fell out of favor a little bit. And you saw that, like, I mean, Gunfight is a, like, Atari 2600 era type game. Slalom jumping to the NES, like, video games took that big downturn. I mean, E.T. And the Pac-Man, the Atari 2600 Pac-Man port, are really that, like, people just turned away from it and thought, like, this is just shovelware. Like, the quality isn't there. And then Nintendo kind of introduced that, like, Nintendo quality seal, and games started getting a lot better. And Slalom is a great game. Like, it's got really good graphics for the time. It's got really fun gameplay. Like, it's very interesting. It is, I mean, Rad Racer was to car racing what Slalom is to, like, winter sports games, and really just sports games in general. Like, there wasn't a lot of, I mean, you had like the Tecmo footballs, you had like RBI baseball, I think, but like not a ton of sports games. So Slalom was one of those few, like, especially, like, I grew up here in Salt Lake City. Like, there were tons of skiers. Like, skiing may not be worldly popular, but I mean, in my neck of the woods, like, skiing was a real sport that people loved. And so it was kind of cool to see that in the form of video games. RC Pro-Am dives into that even more. Like, you've got racing games. I mean, these are radio-controlled cars. That's the idea. RC is radio-controlled Pro-Am. But again, fun and upgrades. Like, you're talking about, like, you're upgrading these pieces of the car, you're collecting them on the track, and that leads to the next race. You're finishing a series of races, and the upgrades that you pick in the previous race follow you through to the next race. And so not only are you trying to win this race, it's this mix of like, oh, well, I might want to go out of my way on this next turn to grab that piece, to grab that chunk, to grab whatever I can from these these parts along the way, so that I can upgrade my speed, I can upgrade my steering, I can upgrade like top speed, acceleration, all these things. And kind of a fun sort of rundown to kind of see that. And really, really fun concept. you can see these upgrades as we get better. I mean, once we're into level 5, oh, we're going to rewind. Again, like, you can use that rewind mechanic. And so I found myself doing that a few times here in RC Pro Am, because they're like, sometimes you just straight up turn the wrong way. See, like that was kind of part of that there. Because you lose track of that, like, which direction is my controller? You can see I'm falling like way out. The other cool thing is like, there is no fourth place. If you finish fourth, you just don't move on. And so you have to find a way to just like stay. That one turn is just getting me every time. I need to master that one turn and I'll be solid. I've got to just stay in third. That's kind of the, oh, got a little, get a good turn here. Let's get a good lap. Nope. Okay, here's the turn. See, it's that turn. Every time it's that turn. Oh, see? Wrong way. I just wrong way turn. Yeah, we're gonna go back a ways. We're just gonna do that whole turn. Here we go. Better, closer, warmer. Oh, he spun me out. Sucker. Yeah, I mean, we're talking like competitive racing in the, like, you can spin people out. You can like press them, like, see how he just pressed me against the side? No, we're gonna go back. I can do better than third. I was in first going into this final set of turns. Yeah, there we go. That was significantly better. There we go. There's the first place. That's our first gold. I've got some bronze, some silver. You can see again, like we're on to level 6. We now have some upgrades. But that rewind feature, I mean, I use it a lot, but it brings that barrier to entry for these games significantly down. Because, I mean, these are hard. RC Pro-Am is not an easy game. I mean, without rewind, like you can see, I'm just getting absolutely destroyed. And there's some cases too where like I may just want to, like, I realize that I missed a power up that I'm going to need later. Like, let me just rewind and go get it. Like, that's what I like about some of these collections. And like, you see that with like Nintendo Switch Online, and I can only go back so far. Like I can't even go back to where I'm leading. So this isn't even like a huge advantage for me. But for little mistakes where it's just like, hey, I screwed this up and I just needed to do that one turn better. It can be super helpful. So that's really what we're trying to see. And you see that like Nintendo Switch Online, that's one of my favorite things about those old school games is I can just do a quick rewind. If I'm in a boss battle or something where like, I just want to see, like, I want to get back to where like I'm not at 10 health, or I just want to do something that like gives me a sense of going backwards and redoing that little step. It can be incredibly helpful, and it removes that barrier to entry. And it's not forced either. Like, nobody's forcing me to do that rewind. If I want the challenge of saying like, hey, no rewinds, I can put that limitation on myself. While we're talking about RC Pro-Am, we're just going to take a quick peek at RC Pro-Am 2. Again, like, we're just advancing gameplay. Like, this is a very similar game. I mean, RC Pro-Am was a pretty good success. Like, there were a ton of people that played that game. And so 2 was just a way to capitalize on that. And hey, let's add some new features. Let's add some additional gameplay. I'm not going to add my name. You can see the tracks are a little bit different. You have height, like we have jumps, which is fun. Other than that, like, I mean, we're not talking about much different here. Like we're kind of doing the same. Like, it's that isometric racer. The controls feel a little bit tighter, which is nice. Starts out like the ramping on this one feels a lot better to me than 1. On 1, right out of the gate, from race 1, I mean, it's difficult right out of the gate. This one feels a little more like, okay, like this first race, like I have a pretty good chance of winning this first race unless people get those arrows. But like the difficulty ramp feels a little bit better in this game than RC Pro-Am 1 to me. And I don't know if that's maybe because I played it after and I had gotten a feel for it, but really, really fun concept. You have, I mean, the rewind feature applies to all of these old school games, but you can see like we're earning money. We start earning points towards these cups as well, and those add up. So again, like you're just kind of like fiddling around, and you can see like I can start to like spend some money here. I can say like, okay, well maybe I want some buckshot for 2,000. I don't have enough for that. Or missiles or bombs or 12,000 lasers. Like we're going out of control there. So it won't let me, I don't know how to go back. Okay, there we go. So like tires, like maybe I can look at some skinnies for 2,000. Yeah. Motor. Like I can start to purchase upgrades. So it feels a little less like that first one. I'm just collecting them on the track. This one I have a little more control over, like, okay, I need to improve my engine, or I want to add some offense to my vehicle, and layering features. It's all about layering. Like start with something simple, layer features. Like I can go to the next race. I don't need to buy anything. I don't even know that I have the money to buy anything. But if I just say, okay, take me to the next race, it does it. This one, like we're starting out in like a flipped mode. Like we're starting out at the top of the course, which just throws me for a loop in the get-go. But you can kind of see like that's where the problem really arises here, is controls are sometimes hard to just get the finesse around that like isometric racer. And I think that's the challenge here, but it's a fun challenge. Like I don't at any point feel like these are my mistakes, or these are the game's mistakes. Like if I screw up, it's because I wasn't in the right headspace for that turn. And so it does really feel like it's just, no, you just got to practice to improve. And that's where you want these games to be. There's nothing wrong with a difficult game. I mean, you look at like the Mega Man games and some of the other games in this era, Wizards and Warriors and like that kind of stuff. Like those are difficult games. There's nothing wrong with a difficult game, but it can't feel like the game is cheating me. Like I have to feel like I'm the one in charge of this game, and how I do is up to me. The other nice thing about this one is even though I was last place, I could still finish that race. I could still go and earn money, buy upgrades, do that kind of stuff. With RC Pro M1, the first person to finish sets the places for everyone else, which can obviously be a little bit disappointing. I at least got to finish the race there. So I can grab collectibles, I can grab money, can get that kind of stuff. So again, just probably listening to feedback from users and adapting change. Like that's what this is all about, whether it's software, games, like listen to that feedback. You go back to RC Pro M1 and you would watch playtests and hear what people say. Like, hey, I wish that these upgrades weren't pick upable on track. Like I wish that I could say which ones I wanted, or I wish that I grabbed money and could buy upgrades. And they probably took that feedback directly and applied it, which is really cool. Cobra Triangle is almost that same game, just with boats. I mean, it's the same concept of that like sort of top down, like 3/4 view racing. So you have the same problems with controls, like the same hiccups in getting those controls to feel right. But really fun. And it has a ton of different game type modes. Like not only is it racing, you have the like trying to recover mines. You have like guarding these people. This one is like incredibly hard to me. Like, I don't know why, but I think part of it is like with this game, your shoot and move buttons, at least as far as like this is concerned, like this remake, are directly opposed to each other. Like I can't move and shoot. Like they're on, like I would have to hold my controller like this to be able to like do that. Like I would love to see like shoot down here and move up here. So you see a lot of that where it's just like sometimes hard to do those controls. But again, like they're taking this concept, they're taking this isometric or pseudo isometric and giving it tons of gameplay. I mean, not only are you doing RPGs and action games and adventure games, you're doing sports games, you're doing racing games, all of this. So really cool technology. Like that's the thing that I love about Rare is they're never afraid to sort of push that envelope. Especially with like overarching themes. Like this isn't just like, oh, we're pushing the envelope where we're introducing story. Like they're pushing tech envelopes. Like isometric in 1983 and 84 is out of control. And you see that again. I mean, that's the makers of GoldenEye. Like they revolutionized the first person shooter. I mean, Doom, Wolfenstein, all of those came before, but GoldenEye changed the, like, no pun intended, changed the game in the space of first person shooters. Like the way that it took weapons, the way that it took maps, like the multiplayer in whole. Like, I mean, Doom and that were single player games. You had Quake. I think the first Unreal was possibly before. And so you had some multiplayer in the form of LAN parties and that, but I don't know that you had split screen multiplayer. Like, let's all go to Joe's house and play GoldenEye on the one screen with split screen. And they're really just revolutionizing stuff. Snake Rattle Roll, I tried for a little bit. It's kind of this weird mix of Marble Madness and like Snake. I mean, for the most part, you're trying to collect these orbs. I had an even harder time controlling this than RC Pro-Am and Cobra Triangle. Like the controls on this one were super finicky to me. Once I got in there, just really kind of just realized like this was just not worth the time. We have 30 plus games to try to touch. I didn't spend a ton of time in here. Solar Jetman is another one in that Jetman series, or I assume the Jetpac series. Maybe it's not, maybe it wasn't intended to be the same, but it feels like very similar. And you've got the same type of character. You have a design upgrade here. Like this is an NES game, like you get a graphical upgrade. This one introduces ships. Like not only are you the astronaut, like you've got a ship too. And it kind of mixes this gameplay between like your ship and your character. And they have different controls. You've got the password system. Like you can see here, like I have like once I get to a certain point, I have this like KBBK, BBD, BBD, BB password. So kind of interesting concept. You're ultimately trying to collect these things, like you're flying around, grabbing objects, trying to get them back to ship. Not too dissimilar from Jetpac, right? Like that's what we're looking at is, hey, we're flying around, we're gathering resources. This one's cool. Like I love the ship because it does this like pseudo 3D where like they have this like rotoscoping going on in the ship, which feels really cool. Like this is this like combination of like, what if Asteroids was like an adventure game where you had to go and collect? You're not only shooting, but you're going and collecting. I mean, you have shooting just like Asteroids does. And like, we can go and see that. Like, as we go to this guy, like we can go and try to take him down. But ultimately, like my goal here is to not hit, like you can see, I kind of got injured there. Very touchy. Like that's the one thing that I will say is if you get going too fast, like you're just done. But ultimately, like we've got to like make our way down to these places. Oh, barely missed. And collect some things. Like you can see it's kind of this like mix of like working against gravity and going and finding this stuff. So like we're going to see if we can grab this. And ultimately we're trying to bring this back to the ship. I assume we're trying to bring this back to the ship. So like same mechanics. This one's heavy. Like I apparently have to like really get momentum to get it back up this chasm. Oh, see, now I'm down to my guy. My guy cannot carry these things. So as the Jetpac man, my goal is more to like go and collect like gems and some of the other stuff. So like I'm going to kind of make my way over here, but same concept. Like you can see, we're just upping that gameplay. We took Jetpac, flying around collecting things. Okay, well, we're going to take that concept and we're going to go a step further. And now you're like collecting items. You have like your world isn't on one screen. Like I have to go around and like fly from screen to like not screen to screen, but I have a larger world and I'm collecting things and it's a challenge to get them back. It's not as easy as it was previously. and I'm fighting gravity. Like I'm flying this big thing back, and let's see if we can get it back and connect it to this base, because I don't even know for sure if that's what I do. Oh. Come on, come on. Just get it there. I mean, is that what I do? Is having a really hard time getting up in the air. Come on, there we go. Okay, yeah, so I do. My probes are now equipped with shields. Battletoads is one of my all-time favorite, like, beat-em-up games for sure. And just games in general. Like this NES era game, I loved Battletoads. And even more so, Battletoads Arcade. Like I put so many quarters into the Battletoads Arcade. It was like this and the X-Men arcade game, Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles. I mean, this is like direct competitor to the TMNT arcade game. But I loved this game. Like it was super fun. If there was someone on TMNT at the arcade, I'd go grab the Battletoads cabinet. Those were kind of my go-tos. Or X-Men. Like if the X-Men cabinet was there, that was choice number one. But then it was like TMNT, then Battletoads, and then maybe like The Simpsons. Like I appreciate the Simpsons arcade game. But we love these. But this is one of those classics where you can kind of see, I mean, the arcade to home console ports killed the game industry for a couple of years there in the early 80s. Like you would see Pac-Man is a great game, well designed, great to play, and the Atari 2600 port killed it. And you saw that in some of these. Like you saw the TMNT arcade game, and then you saw the TMNT NES game. And the technical capabilities just aren't there on that NES console. So you did have to make them different. I mean, we can look at the footage from this Battletoads arcade versus the Battletoads NES port, and they're wildly different. I mean, this arcade is 1994 compared to 1991, but I mean, you're getting a wildly different gameplay style, which is, I mean, it's just the technology, but they weren't horrible. Like, yeah, I think at that point, people kind of understood the difference. It's like, hey, I could go and dump $100 worth of quarters, or I could pay $50, $40 to have this game at home and play it at home with friends and kind of go and enjoy it. So really interesting. I'm not going to dive too much into it, but this is your classic beat 'em up, right? Like I don't think Battletoads did anything groundbreaking other than its kind of attitude. To me, this was the Sonic to Mario, like in the same way that like this is like to the Turtles. Like the Turtles, like they were crude, rude dudes, as I think the song says, but Battletoads really took that a step further. I mean, this game has like a lot of innuendo. It has like some language and stuff in there that like you wouldn't have probably seen in a Turtles game for the time. And that was kind of the idea. In the same way that Sonic was like the bad boy to Mario, Battletoads were kind of the bad boys to TMNT, which is kind of a fun dynamic, and it felt a little more adult at the time than Turtles, which like isn't even completely true, because even Turtles were edgy for their time, especially if you go, those original comic books are dark. And I think you lost that when you got into the 90s TV show. Some of that got faded away, but I mean, some of the concepts were still there. And the Battletoads games they're fantastic games. This has a remake, which isn't in this collection, but there's a remake of the Battletoads on Xbox 3. I don't know if it was 360 or if it's like Xbox One. I think it might have been after the 360 even. It might have been Xbox One. And it's another great game. Like, it's just classic beat 'em ups. You can't go wrong with these classic beat 'em ups. And you're starting to see like a little bit of a resurgence in them. Like Castle Crashers, one of my all-time favorite games. Like the Scott Pilgrim game, a classic like side-scrolling beat 'em up. Like there's a taste for these games because of our classic childhood. Like as gamers get older, they go back to these, like Golden Axe. Like I played the crap out of Golden Axe back in the day, and to see those games remade, like I love them. Like I love Castle Crashers still to this day. Like I'll sit down with my kids and play Castle Crashers for hours. It's just dumb fun, I guess, is really what it boils down to. Killer Instinct is not spending a ton of time here, but this is like your classic fighting game. I have, full disclosure, I have never been good at fighting games. Like they've never really been my like cup of tea. Like it's not what I love to play. I mean, I love playing them like with friends, but like I would never sit down single player and like try to get through a fighting games campaign. Like they've just never been, I've not been good at them is really the reason why. Like I'd probably like them a lot more if I was better at them, but I'm not. And so not spending a ton of time, but like we said, like I love that like the wolf's name is Saberwolf. Throwback to the Saberwolf game back in the 80s. I think there's a few other call outs in here too. Like they call out a couple of other like character concepts and ideas in this game, but really a fun game. Like really just a Mortal Kombat competitor, a Street Fighter competitor, like those kinds of things. Like Primal Instinct, I think was the other one. I think it was Primal Rage? I can't remember what it was, but I always liked that one because it was like all animals. Like you could be a raptor, a gorilla. This one you have like the wolf, you have like the skeleton, the sort of like Iceman, but still like humans mostly. I really liked the Primal Instinct one because it was just like dinosaurs fighting gorillas, fighting all sorts of stuff. But I don't know, the classic fighting game. Blast Corps. I mean, Blast Corps, you're looking at like, this is another like late 90s, like N64 game. I mean, to me, like this one doesn't hold up super great. Like it doesn't hold up as well as some of these others. The graphics just aren't there, but I do find it interesting that like you're going back to your roots a little bit. Like you're going to like kind of an RC Pro-Am style game. Like it's an isometric view. Your driving controls can get a little wonky. Like, again, you're like tilting your controller, like trying to do the best you can, like going from side to side, and kind of just an interesting gameplay. Like you're trying to demolish houses. This is the one that Grady had mentioned that I didn't dive into prior to our conversation. And it is kind of fun. Like, I mean, who doesn't love just like blowing stuff up and wrecking houses? This is kind of like, if Rampage were a driving game, that's what it would feel like. Like your goal is really just to completely demolish these houses. Like leave no stone unturned on these houses. And kind of a fun game to get into in that way. One of the other recurring themes in all of these N64 level games with the Rare Replay is just really long like initial cutscenes to sort of set up the story. And I get it. Like the N64 was a interesting era for doing that and having these like, hey, we can now tell these stories. We have the means to tell more of a story than potentially we did with the SNES or especially the NES. But kind of interesting to see like how crazy Rare went with these. I mean, Jetpac Gemini is I want to say it was like 10 minutes worth of cutscenes. Grabbed by the Ghoulies is like another 10-minute worth of cutscenes. Just lots of stuff. I mean, even like Banjo-Kazooie, Conkers, those are all like 15 plus minutes of cutscenes just before you get into gameplay, which I mean, nowadays that's rough. Like that's hard to get into. You could probably pull it off back then because players had an appetite for that, but the attention spans have just shrunk. I mean, you had like back in the day, the Diablo 2s, which had like great, long, beautifully made cutscenes. But this kind of like in-game footage, although like is cool that it's not like pre-rendered something, like this is like the in-game models that it doesn't feel out of place. But I mean, looking back, Jetpac Gemini just does not. The geometry and texturing just does not hold up, and it makes sense. Like this was one of the early N64 games, if I remember. Like this was like Super Mario 64 era, but Super Mario 64 even was better looking than this. So the control scheme is really the icing on the death cake for this one, in my opinion. Like not only does it not hold up through time, but the control scheme in this was just so hard to wrap my head around. That was weird. The ghoulies just stopped out of nowhere. Choosing game slots was always like choosing game slots is just an interesting method. And you see that like in this era of games, that N64, even back in the NES days, like the ones that did have the battery save files and the SNES days, you kind of had those 3 slots where you and a couple of siblings could all have separate game files saved. Nowadays, that's all just tied to gamer tags. And you could theoretically have as many save games on a system as you want, and it just ties to your username. And you don't necessarily have to choose a save slot, which is an interesting solution to that problem. Yeah, I mean, you can see really long cutscenes again on Grabbed by Ghoulies. Not a ton going here. The butler is shocked. He is absolutely shocked. Tons of tutorial text in this game. Like every single mechanic is introduced with one of these like comic book turn page cutscenes, which are cool. But these are like long breaks. Like rather than just an on-screen prompt. I mean, you have a cutscene, a loading screen, another room introduction screen. Then you've got this pop-up that kind of tells you like, oh, do this. And it completely takes you out of the gameplay. It's just really obtrusive. Like it just feels really obtrusive. Every character, every enemy type is introduced. So right there, you saw the imp. It does that with every single character type. So what could like this game controls well and like it feels like a good, fun game, but it's just so stop and go. Like it has so much stopping the action and going and stopping and going. And once you get past this first initial, probably the first 30 to 45 minutes, then the game probably really starts to hit a stride, and it's a combination of like puzzles and action. But getting through these first 30 minutes is rough. Like there's just tons of information, and it's not given to you in a very like smooth way. Like it's very abrupt, very full of cuts, very full of non-controlled sort of stuff. They are stop screens. Like they are full stop screens. And you can see the butler makes his way back out, which is fantastic. Yeah, camera controls are solid. Like you have movement on one stick, camera controls on the other stick. Like this feels like this is the zone. Like this is the control zone that we're looking for. Like as opposed to a Conkers and a Jetpac Gemini, this game controls well. Like it feels like a polished control system, which is interesting. In between the action, you get these sort of like Dragon's Lair quick time events, which like, I don't know. I'm trying to recall like the first time I remember getting these type of quick time events in games. It was around that like God of War. So, I mean, this is early. Like obviously like Dragon's Lair used a lot of this, but then it just kind of went away, at least as far as I recall. Like I just don't remember a ton of it being used as a game mechanic. But it's interesting. It's fun. It's a great way to kind of continue a story and give you a break, especially in these 3D games, from like running around, controlling camera. It's kind of a fun little break. I mean, these weren't challenging. I assume like once it gets later into the game, you get stuff besides like ABXY, like maybe you start getting into some triggers or bumpers. I mean, I don't know. The N64 didn't have those, so it might not get into anything more complex than that. But you do see, like, as you walk through this hallway, they are starting to get progressively more difficult. We started with an AAAA, and you had like an ABAB. So kind of an interesting mix of like what you have the ability to do. You can see you can pick up these rare weighty tomes is what they're called. These are kind of the hidden collectibles, and you can find them in like random chests hidden around. But again, just like adds to the replay value. Like you could really press your way through this and skip killing all the enemies and skip exploring, but they do a great job of like adding those types of collectibles to really get you to replay and get you to think through, well, what am I going to do next? Like, should I continue exploring? Should I move on? That kind of stuff. again, you can see tons of just like added stop screens where it's stopping the control system. Get another book. A decent amount of stuff in the rooms that are interactable. I mean, as soon as I break the trophy case, we get another enemy introduction in the form of skeletons. But again, like you can search around. Like I can break that trophy case. I can break the billiard table. I can break where those pool sticks or the billiard cues are housed over there. It kind of leaves a lot for you to kind of do, and the world feels like pretty lived in. Okay, wait a second here. Is that like, what kind of innuendo is going on here with the pool cue and the skeletons? It seems like some adult content sneaking in the scene here. So we're gonna dive into Conker's Bad Fur Day, which is an incredibly, like, I get requests to play this all the time. Like whenever I talk to people from this era of gaming, I hear Conkers come up all the time. Like it's just a great game. Most of the reason is because, as you see here, like it has crude humor. People may find it offensive. Like I think that is the appeal of this game to a lot of people, is that humor. It's a different style of humor. It is meant for mature audiences only. And there's a lot of like breaking, like as I've dove into it before, there's a lot of breaking the kind of like fourth wall concept where like you're talking about this as a video game. And in true Rare fashion, like you have a big long cutscene to start. Like all of these like N64 era 3D, like third person 3D games that Rare had, like they all kind of have the same sort of thing. You have the save states, you have the camera controls and player controls, and these long sort of intro cutscenes, which is fun. Like, I mean, this was a different era of gaming. You could pull this off. You could tell these stories. You could give these narratives, and this one's no different. The difference here is that it's a significantly different story. I mean, this game starts off with like, what is Conker? Is Conker a beaver? I don't know what Conker technically is, but he basically gets drunk and wakes up and doesn't remember where he is, and told his girlfriend that he was going to do something else. So you can kind of see like he has these visions of grandeur, I guess, is really where it starts. So if we jump ahead to some gameplay, pretty straightforward. That you've got your standard like camera controls, movement. I think Conker's got that right. Like that's what I think they've done well, is this idea of like you have movement on a thumbstick, you have the camera on another thumbstick. I mean, these are obviously ported to the 360 controller. Like I'm playing this on the Rare Replay collection, obviously, but it is the right idea. Like they've ported this to 360 pretty well. Where this starts to fall apart is it just like there's so many weird precise jumps, and I don't know if maybe this is partially like that it's lost in translation in the movement to the 360, or if it was this difficult on the N64 or wherever people were playing it. I think this was exclusive to N64 if I remember correctly, and I don't know like what the case was, but I mean, this tutorial level, I mean, I genuinely like couldn't even get past it. Like I got so frustrated. I spent like 30 minutes just trying to ascend this waterfall, and consistently just like falling. This mix of like, do you press double jump too soon? Do you press double jump so late that it doesn't actually do the double jump? What do I get to? Where do I go? The way that Conkers handles tutorials is kind of interesting as well. You're interacting with characters, they're giving you tips. This whole rundown with the scarecrow is like brilliant. This is where we get into that like breaking the video game wall, where he's telling you like, oh, you got to step on this button. It's context sensitive, and Conker's kind of asking, well, what does it do? Scarecrow's like, it's context sensitive. That's what it is. You press B. and it does whatever context is sensitive. And it's funny the way that dialogue occurs. And that's what this game is like. Like, I think that's the strong suit of this game, is its dialogue, is its humor. Like, it is definitely something different. Like, it is different than everything else that was on the 64 at the time. I mean, you had Mario 64, you had these other like third person 3D games, but it just didn't have this level of adultness to it. And Rare is great for that. Like, Rare has a lot of these sort of adult, I mean, I hate to say adult content, because this isn't like, I mean, this is like alcohol and sex kind of stuff. It's not like, we're not talking about like a Leisure Suit Larry type game, but there is like some interesting stuff here, and it's fun the way that they lay out the mechanics, and the dialogue is great. I mean, you have the Scarecrow drinking beer and all kinds of stuff. It's kind of a fun breakdown. Oh yeah, the light comes on. And the voice acting, like, I mean, it feels crude now because we have like legitimate like voice actors doing a lot of things. I don't know. I know no harm to the people who did the voice acting here, but my guess is that like this was just a lot of the developers doing voice acting for a lot of these characters. It feels just like not quite professional, but I mean, it's interesting regardless, and it's funny. Like there is definitely a string of humor. One of the other like crazy things about Conker's is just that I don't get a sense of like what is and isn't possible, or what I'm trying to do. I found myself like, I got the key, I hit the key with the pan and opened the door, but then I couldn't figure out there's the guy guarding the bridge. Like I could not figure out how to get past him. I didn't know if I had to hit the key again to get something. I tried hitting this key a second time, like probably hundreds of times, and couldn't get it. Despite like, there were times that I definitely hit the key and it didn't do anything. So that led me to believe like, maybe I'm not supposed to do this. Maybe it will not give me something else. But that messaging should be there. If it sees a player sitting and swinging at something for 30 plus minutes and it's not going to do anything, there should be some level, especially early in the game. Like if you get later in the game and you've started to understand what the mechanics are and how it works, by all means, let someone go and explore stuff and be a goofball. But I genuinely could not figure out what to do. Like within the first half hour, I was kind of just done with Conkers. Like the humor's there and it's funny, and I get the appeal for some people, but for the gameplay, like it was just the humor did not outweigh the difficulty of gameplay for me. So I couldn't continue going on with this. It was just falling, and you'd get to the almost the top of the waterfall and miss one jump, and there was no like saving grace. There was no saving grace of like, oh, we're just going to put you back to where you jumped from, like a Zelda game would do, or a lot of other games will just reset you to where you jumped off. Nope, you fell all the way down the waterfall, landed safely in the water, which meant you just had to repeat the entire process. You had to do every single jump on that waterfall again, and it just became incredibly time consuming, and I just couldn't keep doing it over and over and over. I mean, we have other games to get to in this collection, and that's what we wanted to do. So yeah. So jumping into Banjo-Kazooie, we'll take a look at this. Like we said, very similar game style, game development technique. Probably used the same engine potentially. Like the developers probably used a very similar engine in Banjo-Kazooie as they did for Conker's Bad Fur Day. I can't remember where this originally came out. If this was a PS1 or 2. I think Crash Bandicoot was PlayStation, so I think Banjo-Kazooie was still like a Nintendo title. I don't know if it was anywhere else, but same kind of thing. We have a long intro cutscene. We're laying out the story and narrative, like very heavy story elements here. The difference, at least, and I didn't get far enough into Conkers to know what I was able to do, but the one thing you see with Banjo-Kazooie is it right off the bat. You go through your story, you go through your tutorial, or you go through your cutscene, lay the groundwork, and then you're jumping into like 12 straight tutorials learning these mechanics. Like there is no shortage of mechanics in Banjo-Kazooie. You can jump, double jump, you can swim, you can use the bird to attack, Banjo can attack, you can do these like roll attacks, tons of mechanics, but it didn't feel overwhelming. Like you work your way around the map yourself to discover these tutorials, and you can jump in whatever order you want. You can't cross the bridge at the top of the tree until you've completed all the tutorials. So it does a great job of segmenting it, making it feel like it is your choice. Like I didn't feel at all like pressured to like do anything in any particular order. I didn't feel like I was being rushed. Every single mechanic, the mole like gives you the story, tells you where it's useful, and then you have a little practice area to give it a try. And you don't move on until you've accomplished that mechanic a couple of times. Conker's kind of just threw you the wind. The Scarecrow tells you it's a context sensitive button and it does stuff, but like jumping, double jumping, all of that stuff was kind of like left to your own devices, and the only way you figure it out is getting up that waterfall. Banjo-Kazooie gives you good open practice areas to get it down with every single mechanic. And you can see there's this like friendly banter, I mean friendly or not so friendly, between the mole and the bird, and talking about, well, when am I going to get to try something? And again, it's the same type of humor. It's obviously like a younger audience. Like this was almost like a version of Conker's Bad Fur Day, but for kids. Like everything is kind of like, I don't want to say dumbed down because there's more mechanics. There's more mechanics in Banjo-Kazooie than there are in Conker's. But the tone, the way that it breaks down mechanics so that you can be sure to learn them before you move on is way better for a younger audience. But that translates directly to an older audience as well. Like I don't think that concept should be unique to younger audiences. Like I am an old gamer, but I got lost in Conker's quick. It was frustrating, and I didn't know what I was supposed to be doing. Banjo-Kazooie doesn't do that. Like it has enemies built in, it breaks everything down, and you can kind of see the difference between what does Banjo do, what does Kazooie do, how do they work together, and what mechanics you can use with all these buttons. And at first when I was doing them, I'm like, oh, this is a lot. Like there are a lot of mechanics to use. How am I going to remember these? But as I played a little bit more, it became apparent that like it's pretty obvious when you need to use a certain thing. If the enemy's up in the air, you're going to have to use that jump and peck attack. If the enemy's on the ground, use the roll attack. If you need to break something, use that roll attack. And the way that the controls worked just seemed so much more fluid. Like I said, Conker's got the movement and camera right. Like I think that was better, as opposed to like if we go back to Force Gemini, I keep calling it Jetpac versus Jet Force. I'm so used to the Jetpac games, but Force Gemini has such horrible like camera movement controls. It was just impossible to play. You don't know like, okay, is this like a first person view where I can move my reticle? Is this third person where I'm just moving around and kind of aiming from the hip? And it was this weird mix of that. Banjo and Conker's both do it kind of the right way, where you're not switching back and forth from first person to third person. You're not using this like reticle aiming versus regular aiming. And it just feels good. It feels good and natural. And you can kind of see here, like you finally get past all these tutorials and can now see like, great, like let's get past here. We've done all the tutorials. We have that checkpoint. You're making sure your players know like exactly what they're looking for. Like, hey, we've gotten everything checked out. Now we can cross this bridge. Now we have the ability to move to the next step. And it doesn't feel forced. It's not like a locked gate. I mean, it is. You literally can't cross that bridge until you do them. But it doesn't feel that way. It feels like the mole is simply telling you like, hey, before you go into Gruntilda, like you're gonna want to like figure this out. And then you get, like, as Rare usually does, a nice, good cut scene across, which is interesting. Like Gruntilda, as a villain, you see, like, this is one of the villains that, like, if you look up like video game villain best lists, Gruntilda's usually up there. Like, it's a like fun, well-written sort of character that feels like a good video game villain. It's like your classic villain, and it's funny, and you have the goofy sidekick for her as well, which is interesting. So lots of great storytelling in Banjo-Kazooie, and despite it probably not getting, I mean, there's a lot of fans of this game and genre, but like, I definitely don't get as many people saying, oh, you haven't played Banjo-Kazooie, you have to, as I do people saying, oh, you haven't played Conkers, you have to. Whereas like at a 30-minute view level, Banjo-Kazooie is a significantly more well-designed game, I would say. Just the way that the gameplay plays out in that first 30 minutes, in that opening bit. And to cap things off, let's take a look at Perfect Dark. I'm not going to jump into Perfect Dark Zero just in lieu of time. We've played tons of games in this collection, and so we'll kind of leave that for potentially another time. But I do want to discuss lightly Perfect Dark because, like, as you remember, me and Grady talking about it at the first, this is probably the shining gem of Rare for me. Like, most people know GoldenEye. There's obviously some others that aren't in this collection, like Donkey Kong Country games come up. I love Diddy Kong Racing, like I mentioned, but Perfect Dark is like the swan song of Rare for me. This game is like near the top, especially in the N64 era. This took what Bond started and like absolutely blew it out. If GoldenEye was like a taco meal, it would be like a good street taco. Perfect Dark is like an amazing taqueria where you have everything you want. You can really fine tune the things, and you can see that like as we're going through, we can add sims. Like we have like meat sims, easy sims, all these like different types. Like you have like the venge sim where it's whoever killed me last I'm going after. We have like the peace sim that's just trying to like keep the peace. All these different types of AI, and they do, like, even for this era, they do control completely different. Like, we're gonna load this up with just easy sims to like see some basic gameplay here. But the other thing I loved is everyone loved the GoldenEye levels, so they included it here. You can go to those classic levels and play the classic GoldenEye levels that you know and love. And it was fun because it was a little bit of the familiar with a little bit new. Like, a lot of the weapons play the same. Like, you have the RCP-90 in GoldenEye. You have the RPC-45, I think is what it's called here, but the mechanics were about the same. Your pistols are all pretty similar. Like, I don't think they're named the same thing, but you kind of have that range of pistols to use. But an incredibly similar game. I think the dual wielding is the big thing. I can't remember if GoldenEye allowed you to dual wielding. The other thing that Perfect Dark added that I don't think GoldenEye had was the secondary weapon system. Like being able to take your weapon, and every weapon has that secondary mode where you can say, okay, I want to switch the rocket launcher from standard rocket launcher to guided rocket, or the dragon turned from like a grenade launcher to like a prox mine or something, if I remember correctly. And there was the one that turned into what they call the laptop gun that I just loved, because you're basically setting it up, and it was a sentry gun. Like, you would just put it in the corner of a busy corridor and just watch your kill count go. Like, especially if you were playing with sims. Like, if you were playing with real players, most people would learn that laptop gun was there and find a way around it, or disable it by shooting a rocket or something at it. But with sims, like, you could just clean them up. Like, you wipe the floor with sims with that laptop gun. And sometimes it was just funny to like sit back and watch people run into a room and get mowed down. And, all of those secondary weapons were fun. It pretty much doubles every weapon in the game. Like, instead of having to figure out how you fit all the weapons you like. A lot of these weapons have double modes, so you could say, okay, well, we're only going to have 3 to 4 weapons on this map, but all of those 3 to 4 weapons have a secondary. So you're getting a lot of versatility in that. And I think it just broadened that and made it a little more fun, because it was a debate on like, what are you using, primary or secondary for these different types of weapons? And that was kind of just something new and interesting to me for Perfect Dark. And like I said, like, I really do think this was we got GoldenEye right. Like, we laid the groundwork for a first-person shooter. Specifically, like, I mean, these are not the first-person shooter, obviously. I mean, that goes to the Wolfensteins, the Dooms, those PC games were kind of the birth of first-person shooters. Like Duke Nukem, like I played a ton of Duke Nukem back in the day. But Perfect Dark really does, like, lay out the other side of it. Like, it gives you that rundown of, like, the multiplayer. Perfect Dark, although it's not the first-person shooter, it really does. It got multiplayer, like, near perfect. I mean, GoldenEye started it. Perfect Dark sort of finished it. But it did, like, if you only had a couple of friends that could play, you could add The Sims to flesh out the rest of that game. That was like GoldenEye's flaws. Like, unless you had 4 people, it was hard to feel like a good game. Like, one-on-one was just hard, because it really was like, whoever's better, it's going to be plainly obvious who's better in a 1v1 game. But if you get 4 people in there, things started to work out, because sometimes you could start to team up on the better player. Sometimes a player would take half of the health and you just finish them off. So adding The Sims really allowed you to play this as 2 people, 3 people, or even 4 people, and just add those more difficult Sims. Like, I remember we would play 4-player games and add hard Sims, like add some of those different AIs, and it would become this challenge of, like, we cannot let the Sims win. Like, do not let a Sim win this game. And when you put someone like a Venge Sim in there, where they would just come after you, like, it was hard, because you had to debate, like, do I have the weapons to go at this Venge Sim? Because they're going to come at me. If I kill them, they're going to come at me for the next couple of times. And it got tricky, and it was a fun dynamic that GoldenEye didn't have, that Perfect Dark finalized. And to me, that's its legacy. Is it took what was the first-person genre and layered heavy multiplayer, where I think you got that later in, like, the Unreal Tournament and Quake, some of those, but you didn't have that on the 64. Like, those were PC and those were LAN party exclusives for people that weren't technically savvy enough to do that. This introduced them to that. Like, if you didn't have a gaming PC that you could go and take to LAN parties, the N64 accomplished that for you. And it was GoldenEye and Perfect Dark that did that. So that is it. That is the Rare Replay collection. Again, tons of titles. We did not touch everything. This is a huge collection, and full of really amazing games. And thank you to Grady for sponsoring this, for his donation to Extra Life. If you want to donate, you can see the link below. Like, I'll add the QR code down here. You can donate. You can be featured on a future video. You'll choose the game. If you want to, come on and talk about it with me for a little bit before I play. Discuss what you like about it, what maybe your frustrations are, why you chose it, why it's one of your favorites. I'd love for people to donate. All of the money here goes to Extra Life. That's what we're going for. We're trying to raise money for kids. It's part of the Children's Miracle Network. I specifically play for Primary Children's in Salt Lake City. That's where this money is going to. I love playing games that people recommend. This is kind of your chance to, anytime, if you've ever said, oh, you have to play this to me, now's your chance. Like, you can pretty much force me to put in the time on whatever games you choose. And I'll try to get a hold of them and give them a play. So thank you for watching. This was a long one. I know. If you stuck through it, I greatly appreciate it. Remember to donate. Any donation is welcome. Even if you can't donate the amount to get a video, any donation is welcome. Remember to like, subscribe, all of that stuff for these videos. That helps them spread the word. It helps other people see it so that other people might donate. It helps me grow my community. As always, add your comments. Like, I love interfacing with people in the community about these games. If you want to correct me on something I've said, I mean, I know I called it Jetpac Gemini multiple times, but correct me. Like, use the comments to add your 2 cents, talk about why maybe I'm a horrible person for skipping the Viva Pinata games. I don't know. Like, let me know what you think. I try to respond to everyone who comments on my videos. Like, I want to make this a community, not just videos for you to watch and idly sit by. Like, I want to have conversations. I obviously cannot cover everything as I discuss these videos. So thank you again. Thank you to Grady for the donation. Remember, like and subscribe. I really appreciate everyone's input. So thank you very much.